If you want to talk about a sleeper paddle that may turn some heads for performance but not so much on paper, 𝗏𝐻 Pickleball's unMarked Alpha may just be the sneakiest dark horse I've used in several months. Everyone needs a steady, reliable that they can fall back on when they need consistency and results, and this has been mine. There's really no one thing that makes this paddle stand out by itself, but I do think all the individual components network quite seamlessly, adding up to a paddle that can pretty much do it all. With this channel's PBMED discount code, the final price of the unMarked Alpha comes to $157, a price that I think is very fair and makes this paddle an easy recommendation for me. As for our basics, the unMarked Alpha comes in the elongated shape with an extended handle, and it's 16 millimeters thick front to back. The first time I picked up and played with the unMarked Alpha, I actually didn't even remember what its construction composition was, but within a couple hits or so, it was pretty easy for me to figure out. Inside the core of this paddle, it uses honeycomb cells that are 10 millimeters wide, as opposed to the standard 8 millimeter cell size or the more dense 6 millimeter cell size. Cores that have 10 millimeter wide cells tend to have higher dwell time and more of that classic plush and absorbent feel, as opposed to the historically standard 8 millimeter wide cells, and that's exactly what I felt the first time I hit with it. The face also has a carbon fiber fiberglass carbon fiber layup, as you can see in my dissection and under microscope view here, as the fiberglass layer serves to add just a little bit of pop to the overall plush feeling composition. After taking the face off, you can see that this paddle has a single layer of foam outside of the honeycomb core, which is typical of Gen 2 thermoform construction, and everything appears neat and orderly. Aside from identifying construction components and making sure everything looks okay, the single most useful piece of information that should be drawn from cutting open paddles and looking at the core is to ensure that the honeycomb cells haven't been cut and layered together with the other paddle components to be taller or too thick than their heating molds allow. This is evidenced by creases or folds seen in the cells when you look down into them from the top or when looking straight at them from the side. Paddles like this always break faster than others and probably account for most of what we see with core crushed paddles in the wild. Fortunately enough, the unMarked Alpha cells appear healthy and free of evidence of factory compression, which provides a little reassurance that these paddles shouldn't be breaking left and right. I'll throw the measured metrics on the screen here, which again, essentially equate to a paddle that should feel in the hand about like an average elongated paddle. It's not too heavy, but it's not crazy light, and one thing that is pretty nice is the twist weight, which for a Gen 2 elongated paddle is pretty strong, and that's compared to the typical twist weight for the average elongated paddle, which usually falls just above 6. Like I mentioned before, on paper there weren't a ton of things that stood out to me, but during gameplay, I really felt all the pieces of this paddle came together and I could flow with this paddle very easily. It has a very pleasant plush feel that comes from that wider honeycomb cell size in the core, and the sweet spot was pretty decent too, and certainly was one of the best I've felt for a paddle in the elongated shape. Spin was good and on par with what most good, well-constructed paddles produce these days, and I felt power on drive seemed to be on the high end of what I consider to be all court, which followed a very predictable and linear effort to ball speed ratio, which meant that I could swing with a small amount of variance and not be punished by a larger pop-up like I would see with many Gen 3 foam enhanced paddles. Pop was pretty squarely in the all court category, and by my own standards, I felt like I could control this paddle pretty well. I actually felt like it had a bit more maneuverability than its swing rate of 120 might have implied, and for a paddle of its longer shape, I'm able to move it side to side and adjust it pretty easily. I think it has a clear maneuverability advantage over some of my other top elongated paddles like the Pickleball Apes Pulse X or the 16mm Perseus Pro 4. All in all, I think everything comes together pretty well for the unMarked Alpha, and it may be the most consistent performing elongated paddle I've personally played with. I'm currently using it in league and tournament play when I know I'm going to be a little bit tighter and need something that I can rely on to make drops and dinks when every point matters, while still maintaining the ability to turn it up on drive speed and aggression when I want to. If you're looking for a paddle that stands out in any one particular area, like big power or pop for example, I think I've made it clear that that's not the MO here. Paddles like the Pulse X, the Iowa Pro 4, or the Paddletech TKOs all hit a little harder, but sacrifice something else in return, like head heaviness, less forgiveness, or smaller sweet spots, while the unMarked Alpha takes a more balanced approach, and if I had to pick my favorite feature about it, outside of being balanced, it would be the nice plush feel that comes from the paddle face and its 10mm core cells. And that's my take on 𝗏𝐻 Pickleball's new unMarked Alpha paddle. Like always, I hope the review was helpful. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you here for the next one.